The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And then it's going to tell me. It's going to give us price link. He's got troubleshoot in case somebody has to line and get off. Take off some measures. Welcome. Students. Good afternoon. I am Penny Canny, Senior Vice President of Grantmaking and Strategy at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Welcome to the Grant Seeker Information Webinar. With me today is Sarah Fabish, Director of Grants and Scholarships, Denise Canning, Grants Manager, Jackie Downing, Program Officer, and Christina Ciociola, Knowledge and Evaluation Director. The goals of this webinar are to familiarize you with the responsive grants process at both the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Community Foundation. A few housekeeping items. Space is limited for this webinar, so we ask that only one person from your organization is logged on, so other organizations have a chance to participate. The webinar is scheduled to end at 4 p.m. and we will make every effort to end promptly. We ask that everyone in the room turn off their phone and anything else that makes a beep or any other sound. For those participating from your desk, you are able to type in questions that we can view on our screen. This is the only way for you to ask questions since you are muted. For those of you in the room, you are able to ask questions by filling out an index card. We will make every attempt to answer the questions during and after the webinar. If we are unable to answer all the questions due to time limitations, we will post answers on our website. If you have any trouble viewing the webinar or with your audio, please call Matt Higbee at 203-777-7093. That's 203-777-7093. The webinar will be posted on both of the Foundation's websites by the end of the week. From these websites, you will be able to click on all the hyperlinks that you see throughout the presentation to access documents and web pages. I will now introduce Sarah Fabish, who will begin the presentation. Welcome. I'm very excited that you're all here. I reviewed the people who signed up, who are both in the room and at their desks doing this webinar, and it was interesting to see that there are a number of organizations that we're not familiar with through this process, and that's always exciting to have new people, but it's also exciting to have people who we do know very well coming back and getting the guidance today. So I wanted to share with you, we view the foundation here, and both here in the Valley and at Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, as the community's endowment. The Community Foundation for Greater New Haven has been around a long time, since 1928 when it was established, and the Valley Community Foundation was established in 2004 and is the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's philanthropic strategy in the Valley. That covers the towns of Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Shelton, and Seymour. I always like to share that the Foundation is more than just this responsive grant-making process, because I think it's interesting to know that we give out quite a bit of money. Last year it was just around $20 million over the year, and we do that through the 900 funds that distribute that amount of money. And there's many types of funds here at the Foundation. There's designated funds, in which we gave out about $4.6 million to 162 organizations through about 308 grants. And then the donor buys, which gave out about $4.7 million last year through about 722 grants to multiple organizations. And then we have organizational funds, which many ways serve as endowments for those organizations that we help manage. There's about 70 organizations that have those types of funds here that get the advantage of the investment that the foundation is able to manage for them. And then there's preference and unrestricted dollars, and those are the funds that we use for our grant-making processes that are competitive. We're providing you with a slide of sources of information, and the first and second bullet are our websites. So we highly recommend you go on our websites to find all sorts of information, including information about grant processes. And I'm going to flip to both websites right now. I'm going to go to first the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website. You'll see here that we have a grant section. And if you click on grants you can apply for, it gives you all our grant processes, some of them that Sarah talked about. Also, the responsive grants process that we are focusing on today is under this section of the accordion, and we'll go over this further in the presentation, but this is where you can find all our applications online. Just wanted to point out that the Valley Community Foundation website as well, under their grants and scholarship section, and applying for funding has the, types of grants, has the same setup. So you can see responsive grants here, and this is where the online applications are housed. So we do value the information that we put on the website. We hope you do too, and it's a great source of information for grant making, for knowledge. If you are interested in learning anything about us, we recommend you go on the website. So please navigate the website for the grant section. If you have any questions, you can definitely give us a call. And we're also encouraging you to go on our website for our capacity building section. This is a new nonprofit resource section that we've just built, and it's available this year, so you can have all sorts of information for any capacity building efforts that you may be doing. So we encourage you to log on to, Penny mentioned the hyperlinks will be available on our website tomorrow. You can just click on there. We also have www.GiveGreater.org, which Christina can tell you just briefly about that. Sure. GiveGreater.org is the Foundation's online knowledge and giving resource that we launched in 2010. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Those of you that are not will be hearing more about it later in the presentation. G&H Community is something that you can explore. We have executive directors that can join and network on the web on that particular platform, and also information about events, job openings. So we encourage you to go on there if you never have before. And of course, the Community Foundation and Valley Community Foundation staff are also a resource for you.
Okay, this is Jackie Downing. I'd like to go over the next couple of slides with you that are called Before You Apply for Funding. And this is not necessarily only applying to the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven or the Valley Community Foundation. This is every time you plan a new project or program or an expansion of your existing business. You should always consider these things before you apply for funding to any agency, and particularly our interest is for the Community Foundations that we're talking about today. First, you should do your research thoroughly. Know the guidelines and mission of the organization that you're applying to. See how you really fit in, how it's a match, and why you're applying to that particular foundation for what you're applying for. You can also find sources for what you're looking for through the Foundation Directory online. It's available at the New Haven Free Public Library for free. You can go there. If you are a New Haven organization, not necessarily a New Haven resident, but a New Haven organization, you can get your New Haven library card. Seth Godfrey is the contact for the New Haven Public Library for nonprofits. He's very knowledgeable and will walk you through the Foundation Directory online so you can use it to search through foundations that will give for your particular cause. We encourage you to talk to other people. Talk to other people about who they know. Talk to your board to see if they have connections. There are many family foundations in our community. You can connect your board to Family Foundation board members, which gives you a foot in the door and a little easier access. And you can talk to other grantees. Talk to other grantees who have received funds from an agency that you're going to see if they can give you any tricks and tips on how you might be able to apply and write a more effective application. You can identify possible collaborators and partners. Is someone else doing what you're proposing to do? And if so, even if you're not going to collaborate, you should be aware of what they're doing so you're not duplicating, so that you can speak in your application as to how you are unique and why your services are needed when they do exist. And if indeed you're not unique and you're trying to duplicate something that's happening, then perhaps there is an opportunity for you to collaborate. That always makes a stronger application when we know that folks have been talking. So I encourage you to identify collaborators and partners, or look at outsourcing. If you're planning a huge project that has many components to it and there's someone out there already doing a piece of what you're doing quite well, think about subcontracting and another existing nonprofit to collaborate with, so that you don't have to learn a whole new skill set within your organization. Carefully read and analyze potential funding sources. Stay true to your mission. I always emphasize this. Don't just chase after money because it's there. Make sure you're staying true to your mission through all of your applications. Satisfy their goals, the grantors' goals, because they all have in their mission what they're trying to accomplish in the community. Make sure that you're speaking to what they're trying to accomplish and it matches what you are trying to accomplish. Understand the funder's internal process so you know what the timing is. Don't plan on launching a program on August 1st if you're not going to get an answer until October. So be realistic about the expectations. If you've done your research and you know their average grant size, you will know that if you're applying for $50,000 and the highest grant they've ever given is $25,000, that you're not being realistic. So take a look at what the realistic expectations are. Define your goals, outcomes, and measures first. Set your goals. What is it that you're trying to accomplish, and then work backwards to an action plan. And in that action plan, structure your program. What steps will you take to achieve those goals that you've set? Work out a preliminary budget for the first year. Remember to include direct and indirect costs as well as overhead. Indirect costs are not necessarily overhead. There can be something like an executive director that is working on a program. They may spend 5% of their time directly on your program. That's a direct expense. Above and beyond that, your executive director has administrative functions that are overhead. So you may want to look at those two things, direct and indirect, in different ways and work out the budget for the first year. Write an implementation plan. Who will do what on what timeline? With evaluation built in so you know where you're going to take some measurements as to how you're accomplishing your goals and how you can use that feedback to amend what you're doing so that your goals will be reached. And also in your implementation plan, remember to build in a ramp-up. If you were granted funds on September 1st, does that mean you can actually start your program on September 2nd? Usually that is not the case. So make sure that you've built into your implementation plan a ramp-up period. Develop a fundraising strategy that includes private and public funders. Look for whatever, make sure you'll be able to tell us whatever internal resources you're going to use, whether you're going to absorb part of this new program or existing program into your existing budget, or if you're going out for external resources. What do you need and by when, and be realistic on that. And this is where you can, your research at the Foundation Directory will help to say that you are approaching other funders. Always bodes well when you've come in for an application, so if you can name some other sources, whether or not you have secured that, if you have done your research, it knows that you're working very hard on that program. And select the potential funders and write your proposal.
Okay, since we have you at our attention, we always like to remind you that this is not the only grant process that you're listening to today, the large, competitive, once-a-year grant process, that there are other ways of seeking out support from the Foundation. Of course, the responsive grant process is the largest grant process for both the Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, where you can get multi-year grant funding, where the annual grant is probably between $20,000 and $30,000 on the average. But we have many other processes, some of which are happening as we're talking right now in the first quarter of this year. The Community Fund for Women and Girls and the Q River Fund are actually reviewing applications as we speak. I met with the Q River Fund this morning. The Community Fund for Women and Girls has between $80,000 and $90,000 that they give out on an annual basis. Most of those are under 5 they usually give out one strategic grant that's about $10,000. The Q River Fund, which is solely concerned about the health of the Quinnipiac River Fund, gives out between about $100,000 annually, maybe a little bit more, and those grants are average size between $3,000 and $20,000. And then the New Haven Leadership Program grants is just gearing up. Those applications are in and will be reviewed by a grants committee. There's about $50,000 that is given out through that process, and those grants are usually between $500 to $3,000 and are intended for grassroots groups, organizations that have 2 full-time staff or less, mostly volunteer groups, people who are giving leadership to activities in their neighborhoods. And then the Valley Community Grants, those will be up on their website probably by next week. That's a spring process. They have about $50,000 to give out. Again, similar types of groups. Those in New Haven Leadership Program grants give out for the 5 towns in the Valley for people who are doing really good leadership and grassroots work in the Valley. And then we have 2 year-round processes, one here at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and one that's Valley-specific. Grants 5 and under, which is non-Valley, is a year-round process. You can come at any time. We try to review those applications within 6 to 8 weeks of getting those. If you're interested in that application, you need to contact Denise Canning, who's here and is available by phone or email, and she can send you a link to that application. You have to be an organization that has a budget of $2 million or less. And then there's a revolving response process, the same upper limit of $5,000 for Valley-specific projects. That's a year-round process, similar in terms of review. They do not have any limitation around organizational budget size. And then we do sponsorships, which is a year-round process. Up to $2,500 is usually the upper limit for that. Both the Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven give out sponsorships as they come on. You can get the link to that application on the website. And then scholarships, which the applications are up on the website, and those are for individuals, usually high school students who are going on to further education. So as I said, the responsive grants, which is why most of you are either on this webinar or here in the room, is the largest competitive responsive grant making process that we do. It is very competitive. This is the 3rd year that we're jointly administering the competitive process with the Valley Community Foundation. There is only one door to this process, even though the application is up on the website for the Valley Community Foundation and on our website for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. It is no different. The applications are the same, no matter what door you go through, and will be reviewed in this collective process. So there's no applying to the Valley Community Foundation or to the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven separately. It is the same application. And as I said, it's very competitive. About half of those who apply in this process will go forward in the 2nd phase of this process, so we'll talk about the phases as we go on in this conversation we're having with you today. Last year we received about 150 applications in this first phase, and 71 moved on to the 2nd phase of the process. So you can see it's very competitive. About half can expect to be encouraged to go forward. We have approximately about $1.3 million to give out in this process. It's a little less than we've had in the past. About $406,000 of that is Valley-specific for Valley-specific grant making. This is a source of flexible funding. It's rare that we're the sole source of funding of any project or organization. You need to think about that. So we are looking to what degree you are getting support from others, but we would like to know what an investment from the foundation could do for you. We're open to all requests for general operating capacity building and project support that serve our 20-town region. So our organizations, our foundations are very place-based. You have to be doing work and working with our populations in our 20-town region. We will not be supporting things that happen outside our region. It has to have a direct effect on our communities that we care about here. And we'll talk about the differentiation between general operating, capacity building, project support. A lot of our focus on this webinar and in our conversation today and the examples that we're going to show are project, our program, because we expect that the majority of the applications will be for project or program support, particularly for anybody who's coming new to us. And so we expect that the majority will be that type of an application you'll be needing to fill out. So we're going to get you familiar with that one. And also anybody who's applying for general operating support and capacity building has applied to us before. 1 year and multi-year funding requests are considered. So we really encourage you to think about what your needs are. You can ask for what you need. It'll be the board's decision as to whether they give you 1 year or multi-year funding. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And so last year our reviewers were kind of querying about why some organizations only asked for 1 year when clearly they probably needed more of an investment than that. And so if you need multi-year funding, let the foundation decide whether they're going to be willing to do that for you or not. If you don't ask, you don't get, right? And as Denise has pointed out, bringing up our websites, you can apply online through either of the websites that we've shown you already. And if you have any kind of technology problems about getting access to the application, Denise can help you with that.
We do have basic eligibility requirements for responsive grants. All applicants must be tax-exempt organizations under 501c3 or any applicable section of the IRS, or you could come in with a fiscal sponsor that has a 501c3 or a tax-exempt status under the IRS. Also, as Sarah mentioned, applicants must provide services in our 20-town region. You don't have to be located in one of our 20 towns, but you have to be serving residents of our 20 towns in order to be eligible. You must adhere to a policy of non-discrimination, and in fact, this year our application asks for attachments, and one of the attachments is that you provide an agreement that you adhere to our and agree with our non-discrimination policy. So you'll see that in the attachments page. And applicants who are previous recipients of a grant through this responsive process within the past 3 years must have submitted all their required reports. So for those of you that have already been on the applications, you'll see it's part of our eligibility quiz that we ask you if you are in compliance with all reporting requirements. And if you are, then you can go on and fill out the application. If you're not and you have a question about that, you can call Christina Ciociola and she can help you with that.
So some of the things we just, as guidance, that we would not consider supporting is in this next slide. Projects that do not generally receive consideration include religious activities. And so if you're a church and the project is just for your parishioners, that would not be given consideration. But if you are a church and you're doing something for the greater community that you're in, then yes, we would consider that. We do not do endowment campaigns, nor lobbying, travel, or previously incurred debts or funding deficits. And because, as you can see, that we have a limited competitive pool, requests for capital projects, building equipment, vehicles, and other depreciable items are limited and will be evaluated as to its ability to enable an organization to more significantly serve its constituency. So I want to be clear, we do capital, but we think about it as a means to an end, right? That it is through that capital project that you're able to reach the population you want to serve or serve them better as a result of having that enhancement or renovation or having that building. But we do not do bricks and mortar for the sake of doing that or having our plaque on anything. So there's a couple of questions I'm going to answer. One?
Yeah. So the question is there a maximum number of years for multi-year funding?
Typically, they're 1 to 3 years. We have, on occasion, done a 4-year multi-year grant, but most of them are between 1 and 3 years. This is a 2-stage process with 1 application. The application is due April 1st, and so we may say that a number of times because that's different. In other years, the application would have been due tomorrow, March 1st, and so we have another month to do that. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why we went to one application. Our reviewers who are in the first phase have been asking for more and more information, particularly around financial information. And also, we've been looking for ways to shorten this application process because in the past it's been 7.5 to 8 months from the beginning to end, and that is rather a long time to wait and hear whether you are getting any kind of investment in your project. So we've been looking for ways to tighten and shorten this, and one way to do that is to ask for the full application up front, particularly since our reviewers are interested in that level of information in the first stage, and it allowed us to actually cut out about 5 weeks in this process, because ordinarily in the second phase you'd have to fill out a full application and you'd need time to do that. Well, submitting it all up front is, and it may present challenges, so we understand that. The second phase of this process includes a full review, including a site visit, if you're encouraged. That will happen between in the months of June and July. I understand there's another question. Is it timely?
Yeah. So another question is multi-year funding available for both general operating and project support?
Yes. That's an easy an easy one. As I said, in giving you the stats for last year, invariably we received between 140 and 176 applications. That's really at the high end. We did receive 176 applications one year. And approximately 40 to 60% of those applications are encouraged for the full review, which is the second step of this process.
So to recap the timeline, Sarah went over a few points, but we've provided this for you just so you can have details, so I'm just going to go over it. Again, April 1st, application due date. So April 1st by 5 p.m. We need all the applications in, and because it's an online application, we do deactivate the application. So past 5, you will no longer be able to submit the application. All applications will be reviewed by our reviewers mid-April to mid-May. In mid-May, the outcome of the review is shared with our board, and decisions are made for encouragement for the second stage or the full review that Sarah talked about, which includes a site visit, or discouragement. The end of May, all the applicants will be notified of where they are in the process, either discouraged from the process or encouraged to compete in that second stage. June and July is the full review and the site visits by the reviewers. August to mid-October is when we're writing analyses for our board review, and the funding decisions are made by our board September and October. So all applicants will know the funding decisions by the end of October.
I'd like to add something, particularly since I noted that there were a number of new organizations who are included, who've signed on to this conversation we're having with you today, is that at this point of you being encouraged or discouraged to go to the second phase of this, there is an opportunity to have conversations with staff here. Denise and I schedule conversations over the phone mostly with people to go over what your scores were. And those scores are sent out to you with the indication as to whether you go forward to the second phase or not. We encourage you to take us up on those conversations, whether you're encouraged or discouraged, because you learn something in that in terms of what the strengths of your proposal were and what maybe are the areas are concerned that you could address. And my mantra here is that no is never no forever, and that if you are, and as you can see that it's very competitive and only half of you are going to go forward if you apply, that you can strengthen your proposal and come back to us, or you can use the guidance we've given you to go to other funders to strengthen your proposal. So I really encourage you to take us up on the conversation. Not every foundation gives you that opportunity for conversation. Usually the vote is the face to the community, but we do and love to have those kind of conversations because we want to strengthen your ability to reach us, and there will be a day when we'll support you, I'm sure.
We have another question. Someone's asking, is it possible to apply for program and operating support?
We really encourage you to make a choice. You're competing against yourself, and it does cause questions as to what is the highest priority for you, especially when you think about what we have in terms of a limited pool of funds that are available. So we ask you to make a choice, which one you want to come to the foundation for. So, just to review, the Community Foundation and the Valley Community Foundation jointly administer this responsive grants process. We are, the staff here at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven is the staff to the Valley Community Foundation's grant-making process. We manage both of them, and that's why having it jointly sponsored by us really works well. But the judgments for the Valley Community Foundation Board are central to the determination for those grants that are awarded to not-for-profits and programs that primarily benefit the Valley. We do not want you to think about that as you apply, though, because we'll make that determination, and we use a lot of different pieces of information that comes through your application to make that determination. A lot of it around the demographics, but also there may be opportunities where the foundations share a potential investment in a project or organization. And the Valley organizations need to submit an application to be considered for funding through this process. There is no separate process. There is no separate door. So what's new about the responsive grant-making process, as you have heard, beginning and it bears repeating, is that there's only one full application. There is no two stages in developing your application. So although it's a two-stage process. So that's what's new this year, is that there's the full application is due at the beginning of this process by April 1st, and we've given you more time to do that. And as I said, it has shortened the length of the process by at least 5 weeks. And general operating support and capacity building applications need to include an updated or new GiveGreater organizational profile. And we highlight that because in the past that's been an activity that has been taking place at the second phase of this process when we were asking for a full application. But this year we have to have that done by April 1st, and there are people here who can help you with that. Stephanie Chung can be sought out to make sure that your profile meets the qualifications to be considered as part of the full application. So remember, don't be daunted. I mean, people are looking at this full application because they're not used to answering all the questions that we're asking at this stage. I've heard some positive feedback, and maybe that's because people don't want to tell me the terrible things that they're experiencing because I am part of this foundation, and I acknowledge that. But maybe I'm only hearing the good news, but I've heard positive reactions to that where organizations are saying, yay, I only have to do this once. I don't have to do this in the two parts of the process. But it may be daunting, particularly to organizations who are new to this process. And it's okay if you feel that you're not ready to do this full application at this time. And that's why I shared the other opportunities that are available both through the Valley Community Foundation and the Foundation for Greater New Haven, is because there are some smaller grant processes that might be more appropriate for your organization in terms of your evolution and your development, and that's okay. And so if $5,000 and under grant might help you do your work at this time, get you an experience of writing your grant application to us, maybe that's where you might want to start. But we are not gatekeepers here, and so if you want to fill out the full application, you need to do that in order to be considered in this once-a-year competitive process. So on our website, you'll find these guiding principles for not-for-profits, and we've only pulled out a piece of that. It's a 3-page document. It's our Bible in many ways. We use it actually, and Denise and I and those who write the analysis for our board actually have it at our right hand because it's the way in which we frame our analysis to the board. We ask organizations to review it as they fill out their application, and if you look at the scoring rubric, which will be up on our website after this webinar, you'll see that it also frames the way in which we ask our reviewers to review the applications. And first and foremost, we are, because this is a source of flexible funding and we don't necessarily have priorities for who we fund through this process, we want to make sure that we are supporting viable organizations, and we have ways of looking at that and describing that. We're very committed, both of our foundations are very committed to supporting not-for-profit organizations that strive towards providing the highest quality services and advance ideas, innovations, and techniques that improve the quality of life for our residents. And so that's kind of our belief statement. And think about how you live into that and help us live into that. And it's the belief of the community foundations that the best use of the community's endowment is to invest in not-for-profits that display leadership in addressing issues and seizing opportunities in the community, and who regularly perform evaluation of their services and practice sound programmatic and organizational management. And Christina will be going over the evaluation. We evaluate ourselves. We ask our reviewers as we do this process to evaluate the process that we're utilizing and doing our application. We have a lot of reflection about our own work, and we encourage you to do that because that's how you strengthen the service and the program delivery that you're delivering to the populations that you care about and are concerned about. So we're going to talk about the 3 types of applications, although we're only going to visit the project program application in some detail and go over the questions. But if you are applying for general operating support or capacity building grant, you'll see that the questions are very similar. There will be some different ones that you will have to address. Now, general operating support is defined as a grant that's made to further the general mission and work of the organization rather than a specific purpose or project. And it's been a very difficult idea or concept we found over the last couple of years, although we've been doing general operating support for many years, for people to get their mind around, because you're so used to asking for a specific piece of your operating budget. And you may have that in mind as you come to the foundation for this type of support. But we're not asking you that. We're just asking you to have an understanding of what your operating budget is and to what degree do you need an additional investment to manage that budget. So we're not asking you to do anything specific or outline anything specific for this type of support that you're doing as an ask to the foundation. Just talk about what you are doing in the community as an organization, what issues you're trying to address, and that can be done broadly. Now, because this is general operating support and we've had the experience over the last couple of years, we've put on another 2 pieces of eligibility for this type of support. And there's reasons why. We discovered that an organization really needs to be around at least 5 years to be an evolved organization, to be able to answer the kind of questions we're asking organizations to answer in order to get general operating support. You need to be a fully formed organization in order to be able to manage that. Otherwise, you'll find that application very daunting and the process daunting, because we ask very tough and hard questions about your governance, about your management, evaluation processes, and you may not, if you're under 5 years, really have fully evolved strategies around that or processes in place for that. And the other thing we've discovered is that we really need to know you a little bit better in order to be able to make that judgment call as to whether you're an organization we should invest in general operating support. And so we ask that organizations who have received a responsive grant from either of the foundations are included in this possibility. So first and foremost, you need to be around for at least 5 years and be an evolved organization. And secondly, an organization that is known to either of the foundations by having gotten a competitive grant through this process in the past. Now, that's not bad news because projects and program grants are just as important, and it is a way of getting support. And as I talked to an organization who was kind of disappointed about getting encouragement to go and fill out a general operating support because they're just under 5 years, and they're not going to be 5 years old until next February. But when we talked about whether they were going to be able to answer those kind of questions, they acknowledged that they couldn't. But they are essentially, their organization essentially is a project program, and so filling out a project program gets them the kind of support that a general operating support grant could have gotten for them. So it's not bad news if you can't fill out that type of application for us. There's a question.
Yeah. We have several questions. The first is, can we get a copy of the presentation?
It's going to be on our website
by the end of the day tomorrow. The other question, how many of the second phase applications then go on to successful funding?
Well, that changes every year. In the past, I would say that you know, probably about 2/3 got funding, but last year was really kind of tight, and so it wasn't almost quite a few got funding, and there was only a few that we actually had to say no to. So typically, though, I would say, you know, about 60–70% are said yes to in the second phase.
The next question is, because of the long process from grant writing to potential award, there is a chance that the project would need to change focus because of a change in population, other programs that arise, and other funding received. What is the process for realigning the project goals if needed once an award is made?
Well, you're talking about after the process. I was thinking that during the process, well, because yeah, during the process, we try to address that. In the second phase of this application process, there's great opportunity for conversation back and forth with the person who's assigned your application, as well as with Denise and I. Invariably, leadership changes. One year we had 5 organizations where the executive director changed in that process, and so that changed significantly the organization and maybe its focus. And so we encourage people to tell us about information that changes, good news and bad news, if you got a new funder or if you lost a funder, right up until our board meeting date. There's plenty of opportunities for emails and phone conversations. And in the site visit itself, there's a site visit for everybody who is in the second phase of this, and so there's opportunities, again, to raise things that have come up since you filled out the full application. So there's lots of opportunities for conversation. If it happens after the award, and we've had few experiences with that, again, we would want to know to what degree. If it still fits in within the original purpose and intention of the award, we can make some adjustments, particularly in the budget. If it is totally different, if you can no longer do the project because of changes that have happened in your organization, then you'd have to give the grant back. But if it's still aligned with the original purpose, we can make some adjustments.
Okay, we'll take one more before Sarah continues the presentation. What if you file under a fiscal sponsor who may have received support from the Community Foundation in the past year, but you do not know if they have filed all of their reports? Will the sponsor's report filing status affect the other organization?
Well, we would hope that everybody is up to date. You would want to make sure that you have reported to your funder. So I do expect that everybody has, and that would be a good question to ask your fiscal agent, although that shouldn't directly affect your application. But we do want to have good practice out there in the field that people are reporting to their funders. And Christina is always sending out little notices when people are delinquent. So we want to encourage the good practice. Okay. Project support is defined as a grant made for a specific new or existing project. And I want to emphasize both. We are very excited to think about maybe supporting something new or innovative out there that's happening in the community or within an organization. And we hope that we surface a few of those as we review the applications that come in over the next month. But we also want to really emphasize that you don't have to do something new to come to the foundation for a program or project request. It could be your basic business, and you need an investment of support in order to do that and do that well. So you don't have to think of a new project to come to either the foundations. And I want to emphasize that because people think that you have to do something new all the time, and that's not true. We want you to think about this being a possible source for you to really do the work that you're doing. And we understand that there's ebbs and tides in terms of the funding that you're receiving going, and so there may be a time in which you have been getting funding to do that kind of work in the community for a long time, but that has gone away, and so coming to the foundation might be a way of you being able to continue the core work that you're doing. And project support applications are available to organizations that are either new to the Community Foundation or to the Valley Community Foundation, and those organizations that have received a responsive grant in the past, so either or. But if you're new to either of the foundations, this is the place to start. Fill out a project or program grant as a way of having the first experience. So we'll let Jackie do this one.
Capacity building and support is a module that we pulled out last year for the first time as its own application because it really is a specific application. We define it as a grant for short-term financial assistance to build the infrastructure of an organization for long-term success. And that's really key to what we're planning here. It's short-term financial assistance. It's an influx of cash in 1 or 2 or 3 years that will provide for long-term success by strengthening the organization. It is not program expansion. It is not building capacity of a program. That's a program or operating grant. It is building the strength of an organization. Things like board development, strategic planning, evaluation, capital expenditures on equipment, building renovations, relocation. It is developing a fund development plan, but not hiring a development director as a first step to raising your, this is a very clear distinction. It's not an expense that is going to be ongoing. It's an expense that will occur for 1 or 2 years to strengthen the organization. And like general operating support, only organizations that have been incorporated for at least 5 years and have received a responsive new grant from either community foundation are eligible for capacity building. Denise, I think we have one more question.
Yeah, we have another question. Is there a process to amend application for second stage based on the feedback process?
You cannot actually physically amend the application because we're going to step right into those applications being signed by a reviewer, our writers. But you can share that with your reviewer, your writer. And I encourage you to think about framing those in an email, because as soon as you're given encouragement to go forward, within that week you'll be assigned somebody. And so you'll have their contact information. They'll contact you, and you can begin that conversation about how your proposal perhaps needs to be amended, or you'll address. And we would expect that you address maybe some of the shortcomings that you've learned about through this review process.
Hi everyone, this is Christina Ciola. I'm going to talk a little bit about GiveGreater.org, because if you're applying for general operating support or capacity building, you are required to complete an organizational profile on GiveGreater.org. For those of you that don't know, GiveGreater.org is our online knowledge and giving resource. It is a website right now that contains over 200 comprehensive profiles on nonprofit organizations in the area of their mission, vision, management, governance, finance, and programs. So as I said, applicants requesting general operating support or capacity building will be required to complete or update your profile as part of the process. If you don't already have a profile, you need to create one, and I suggest that you don't wait. And if you already have a profile, then you can work with Stephanie Chung on updating it and making sure all the applicable information is there. For those of you applying for project support, you'll be required to complete a profile if you're awarded a grant at the end of 2013. There are a lot of benefits to having a profile on GiveGreater.org. One of the benefits is that it puts your organization in front of more potential donors, including the Community Foundation's donors. It provides your organization the ability to receive online donations, and it increases the public's understanding and confidence in your organization and the nonprofit sector. Last year we saw that 40% of the gifts made during our Giving Challenge were by individuals who reported they were giving to the organization for the first time. We know that 80% of our donors to the Community Foundation research organizations before they make a gift, and we know that most of them use GiveGreater.org as a resource for their research. We had nearly 25,000 visits to the site in 2012 by 15,000 unique visitors, and to date over $1.3 million has been distributed as a result of GiveGreater.org. We actually have a question about GiveGreater. If your organization uses a fiscal sponsor, is not a 501c3, how do you establish a GiveGreater profile?
You should call me or Stephanie. In some cases, your fiscal sponsor may actually already have a profile. We have a couple that already have a profile. There's also options in some of these situations, depending on the details, to have a profile that's in the background but not viewable to the public because of the fiscal sponsor situation. So there are ways we can work through that. In the application attachments, or there's a GiveGreater.org profile checklist, which will help you understand what fields you need to complete in order to have a complete application. When you go into the GiveGreater.org profile, there will be fields marked with a green bar, and all those fields are required. You must complete those fields. In addition to that, we are asking you to pay attention to some other fields and requiring that you complete some additional fields, and you can find that list in the GiveGreater.org profile checklist, which is available through the link in this presentation and on in the application.
We have another GiveGreater question, Christina. Is the April 1st deadline for GiveGreater profile updates the same for those who are in the midst of multi-year operating funding?
It is not. That's a different. It's a different date.
It's a different. So the April 1st is the deadline date for the application, which includes the GiveGreater profile if you are applying for general operating support or capacity building support.
If you are a current multi-year grantee and you have a deadline to complete your profile by, let's say, June or October, you need to complete that profile by April 1st instead. This deadline supersedes any other deadlines you may be working with. The checklist for the GiveGreater.org profile also requires that you upload all the attachments for the application to the profile, and you can upload those attachments in the Other Documents tab under Other 1 or Other 2, and those attachments will not be viewable to the public once your profile is published. Again, I suggest that if you don't have a profile already, that you contact Stephanie as soon as possible to start your profile and work on it. The next thing we're going to talk about is the logic model attachment. We require that all full applicants complete a logic model. This is for everyone, whether you're applying for capacity building, operating support, or project support. The purpose of the logic model is to describe the program and organization and how it operates. One of the benefits of being on the webinar is that I don't have to hear all the gasps and screams in the logic model, so that's pleasant. But I don't want you to be intimidated by the logic model. The logic model is not an evaluation process or plan in and of itself, but it tells us that you've thought through some of the evaluation components that are important to consider. It allows the reviewer to see whether or not your program or organization has a reasonable chance of achieving its goals. The logic model needs, can you put up the form? Sure. It should be read by column, not left to right, so all the items that you put in the logic model don't have to line up and have coinciding items across. We're going to go over the definitions of the headings. Project and capacity building applicants should complete the logic model for the specific project or capacity building project that you're requesting funding for. General operating support applicants should complete the logic model for the whole organization, so it's going to be a higher level logic model. I suggest that they don't be more than 2.5 to 3 pages at max. I like to see them at 2 pages. For project support applicants, there is an opportunity inside the application to provide more detail around your logic model if you felt like you didn't have enough room. But I think you should have enough room, and in the narrative, you can leave those questions blank. You don't have to copy and paste what you put in the logic model in the application. It's not meant to duplicate. It's meant to add more information. I am available to provide feedback on draft logic models. I just ask that you get them to me by March 25th in order to guarantee my feedback. If you get them to me by March 25th, I'll probably respond by email with some comments and suggested edits using track changes. If you get it to me before March 25th and you want to have a conversation about it, then it's more likely we can do that, but you have to do that for me before March 25th if possible. So let's go over some of the definitions for the logic model. Can you put up the project as a sample? Sure. So in the PowerPoint presentation, we have some pages with all the definitions for the logic models for each logic model column, and also sample logic models for project and general operating support. So you can use those as reference. We're gonna hold up the project one here as
an example. So the goals. The goal is a broad statement about what the program is hoping to achieve. For project applicants, the goals are specific to the project you are asking us to fund. The assumptions, I really like the assumptions column. I think it gives us a lot of information. The assumptions are what the organization or program assumes about the environment they are operating in. The assumptions are also what should support your theory of change. For example, if all the assumptions in your logic model are true, then the program should be successful and effective. Sometimes the assumptions are actually based on published theory and research, but they don't have to be. Assumptions can be based on your experience as an organization. We just want to make sure the assumptions about the environment you operate in are realistic. Many of the programs succeed or fail based on how realistic their assumptions are. In most cases, the assumptions are usually about the need or demand for the program, or what the environment would be like if the program did not exist. As part of your evaluation, you may actually even be testing some of these assumptions. Let's look at the examples of the assumptions in the example. So for example, students do not have sufficient support to ensure successful matriculation into high school and college. So that's one of the assumptions that is supporting the need for the program. Also think about how these assumptions are supporting the need for the project. Another one is one-on-one support is paramount to ensuring students receive needed resources. Let's talk a little bit about the target population. The target population is the group that the program or organization wants to change or influence. The target population should be as specific as possible in terms of geography and demographics. It should not include everyone, and it needs to be well-defined and within your reach. So for example, your target population may be Latino youth living in Shelton, ranging in age from 10 to 13, just as an example of how specific we want you to be with the target population. If we look at the inputs are simply about the resources required. You'll see things like staff, funding, and equipment in the inputs column. It really tells us if the program has the resources it needs to operate, and we often instruct our reviewers and those reviewing the application to look at the inputs against the budget to see if it makes sense and matches up. The activities. In the program logic models, activities will be about the interventions that will be implemented. So if you look in this example, they're going to be doing after-school study halls, merit-based tuition scholarships, and on-site advising, and they're going to be having some peer group activities. So the activities are really about the interventions within your program. If you're doing a logic model for operating support, the activities may simply be a list of all the different programs within your organization, depending on how large your organization is. If we move over to the outputs are simply proof that the program or organization exists. It is not proof that the program is being successful or having an impact. Some people make the mistake of stopping at the outputs and thinking the outputs are evidence of their impact. And it's really not evidence of impact. It's really just evidence that you're doing something. You're having meetings, you're providing an intervention, but it's not really telling us what the result is of those things. So the outputs could be represented numerically. You'll see things like number of participants and number of meetings in the outputs column. You'll see in the example that you don't have to actually put the actual numeric value. You can simply say that you're going to be tracking the number of participants and the number of meetings and so forth. The outputs column should answer the question, how much are you going to do? So again, you don't have to put an actual number here, and we don't expect you to set a target in this area. The last two columns, outcomes and outcome measures, are really the most important columns from an evaluation standpoint. The outcomes are a more specific form of the goal statement. The outcomes should answer the questions, how will the target population be better off as a result of what I'm doing? Or what is the change that will occur in the target population? You may see things like improved literacy rate or increased knowledge in a certain area or reduction in violence or some other negative behavior. The outcomes are important to us from a grant monitoring perspective. If you're awarded a grant, then you will be reporting to us on the progress you're making towards these overall outcomes. So they need to be clearly articulated, feasible, and connected to the goal statement. And I really want to emphasize that they need to be feasible. We often see organizations that are submitting non-feasible outcomes in the interest of being competitive in the process, and we can usually see through that, and we don't want you to overreach or set yourself up
or failure. We want you to be realistic. We are also not asking you to set numerical values here. You can see some of the examples. Our participants will effectively navigate their way toward college acceptance and graduation. Participants will go on to attend and graduate college, and positive peer relationships serve as a defense against adolescent risk behaviors that negatively impact participants' futures. The outcome measures. This is a list of the measures, or some may call indicators, that are going to be tracked in order to determine the progress towards the outcomes in general. The measure should answer the question, how will the organization or program know it's making progress towards its intended outcomes? Now, there does not have to be a measure for every single outcome, but the measure should have a logical connection to the outcomes in general. Outcome measures are typically numerical. You will see things like percentage that complete or graduate, or percentage who demonstrate an improvement in a certain skill. It could also simply be the completion of a certain project or course, especially if there's already literature or evidence that suggests the completion of the course or intervention does make a difference. It is important to make sure you have the capacity to track the outcome measures that you list here. And if you don't have the capacity to track outcome measures, then you should talk about that in the narrative section of the application, which Denise is going to go through in a little while. We want you to be able to, what you put in here, we want you to be able to track and measure. If you have data development needs, then you should talk about that as well. I want to mention targets here. We see a lot of people sometimes put that they're going to see 90% of participants are going to increase their knowledge in an area. We don't need you to put that 90% target or 50% target or whatever it is. You can simply say you're going to track the percentage of change that occurs. And that's a really important point. You can put a target if you have really good baseline data and experience already in this project, but if you don't, we don't expect you to put a target. Other questions?
We're going to take some other questions. People have been asking if we could send them the PowerPoint, and it will be on our website. So we're posting that on our website. You can access it on the website. If you have trouble accessing it, then certainly you can email me and I can send it to you. So there's another question. Does there need to be a certain amount of time in between a previously received grant? For example, if we just finished our project grant period in December, can we reapply for this session?
Yes, you can.
And the next question, what is the maximum amount of project support grants?
You mean I'm not sure if they're asking for the maximum amount of requests. And as I said, the average size grant is usually between 20 and 30,000, but we encourage people to ask for what they need for, and we'll respond to that.
Another question, is it sufficient for your fiscal sponsor to have a GiveGreater profile, or do you have to have your own? How do you do that if you are not an independent 501c3?
I think we need to stress that the GiveGreater profile is only required for those people who are asking for general operating support or capacity building. If you don't have your 501c3, then you are not a fully evolved organization, and so you do not have to have a GiveGreater profile in order to apply for a project or program grant. And that might be something you can consider as you go forward.
We'll take one more. Does the GiveGreater profile need to be completed before the April 1st deadline of the grant application? You will work with Stephanie Chung on making sure all the fields in your profile are completed, and you can actually submit it on April 1st. It does not have to be reviewed by us and published April 1st. For those of you that are familiar with the process, you just need to submit it to us by April 1st. But if I were you in working with Stephanie, I would check in with her and have her make sure that you've completed all the required fields. And she can do that for you easily. Okay. We're going to go on to the budget form guide. The budget form that we provide with the application that you have access to at the website is really designed for those people who are asking for project program support. You could use it if you don't have a budget form for the capacity building grant, but you perhaps already have a format for that. General operating support grants, we are requiring that they provide your current
budget that you're operating in and your previous one, and those are attachments that you need to attach to your application, as well as for those who are asking for capacity building grants, those your current and your past financials need to be attached to your application. So, since we expected that most of the people who are applying through this process are going to be asking for project or program support, we wanted to go over the budget form guide because that has changed. Last year we changed it back to what we had been using previously. So if you haven't applied to us before last year, you may notice that this is different, a little different than what we used to ask you. The intention is that this details the total project budget and details the total requested amount. So if you look at the budget form, you'll see that there are kind of a list of the type of expenditures that we would expect that a budget might have as part of the project. This is not intended to be prescriptive. If your project budget does not include salaries, you can eliminate that area. But we suspect that most project or programs are going to have some kind of salaries or stipends that people are going to need in order to deliver on the program. So this is area. So it's not intended that there are 4 positions, maybe only 1 position. So these are just kind of placeholders that you can write over and eliminate as you see fit. And then again, the program, under the program, we figure there's going to be some kind of program or project support that you need, typically in supplies or equipment. Again, that's just to be illustrative. It's not meant that you have to have an item if it doesn't fit into the project or program. And on down, we expect that there's usually administrative costs in running a program or project, and would like you to outline again. There may be some items that you're outlining in your program project that don't align with what we've noted here. You put that in again, and we would want you to be descriptive about that. And there's a a narrative that you can provide that's a backup to the project, this project form guide. Excuse me.
We just flipped to the narrative that Sarah was just talking about. So
let's go back to the form guide. I just want to make sure, because we feel that there's no confusion about what we're asking you to do. In the total project budget, we want you to outline all the costs that are involved in doing that program project, even if you're not asking the foundation for that, because we want to have your request understood within the context of what the cost of the program is and what it costs you to do it. So outline all the costs and what that adds up to. And then the second column, you can outline for us where you see the foundation dollars that you're requesting, perhaps aligning with those costs that are not maybe covered by other sources. And then we have a column for other sources of funding. And again, we're looking for a dollar amount. So if you've asked, or you already are, if you're committing some of your operating budget towards this, you can outline what expenditures are being covered by these other sources of funding and what that total amounts to. And we expect that these 2 columns probably add up to the total project or program budget. And then we're looking for anticipated date for when you would receive those other sources of funding. And so if it's part of your operating budget, you could say that it's already committed dollars and that it's available as of this date. If you're requesting funding, you're expecting an answer, you can say what the anticipated date is that you're expecting an answer for that. And then we understand that program and project do not happen necessarily just with the financial resources that you're able to acquire to do it. And so we're interested in terms of what kind of in-kind contributions you might be providing to this project or getting from maybe a partner or collaborator. And so many times we find programs or projects are not necessarily having to cover the cost for the space that they're in because that's given to them. But there is a value to that, and we understand that that program or project wouldn't be able to happen without that space. And so this is your opportunity to share the other kind of resources that you're bringing to that project that you may be able to get in kind. And that's very valuable, that you're able to take advantage of the resources or assets that already exist in the community or with your partners or collaborators, and you're able to give a dollar amount to that. And then as Denise showed, and we're pulling up again, is that there's a narrative. And so we want to know how you figured out these costs. So if it's a position, say there's a coordinator for the program or project, we want to know if that's full-time and what the hourly rate might be and how you figured out what that annual cost is going to be here. And this is a way of describing that in the same way that there might be supplies and every kid is going to get a notebook or something, and so you're supplying 25 notebooks at a cost of $5 a piece, and what does that add up to? 25 times 5 is what? And same thing with equipment. And then a degree to which there are administrative costs, again, how much you might need in terms of printing or travel or insurance or bookkeeping that's going to be applied as the cost of delivering this program or project. You're able to describe it in the in this budget form guide that's a backup to the actual dollar one that was previous.
Sorry, we have a question in the room. Do we add in-kind contributions into the total project budget?
No, I would not, because I mean that's usually an estimation, and so it's not necessarily a hard number. So I would not add that into the total project.
Are there any other questions in the room? We have, if you apply for general operating support and your 2014 budget hasn't been completed, can you use your 2013 budget as a guide, knowing that it will most likely change in the new fiscal year?
Yes, you can. And also, as that comes, we know that some people are in a fiscal year July 1st to June 30th, and so you may not have a formally approved budget that your board has approved for you, and so you could supply that to your reviewer if you're in the second stage in July when it becomes available as well. But give us your most current financial information.
Any other questions in the room? We can take a few questions from the webinar before we go into the application. So a question is, an agency must be in existence for 5 years before submitting a general operating support or capacity building grant?
Yes.
For the attachments, if the organization doesn't have all the documents, i.e. document destruction, policy, etc., do you have boilerplates for that organizations can review?
We do have samples you can review. This is a question specific to the GiveGreater.org profile. It asks questions if you have certain management and governance policies and documents in place. The requirement is just that you answer yes, no, or under development to the question. It's not required that you actually have the policy in place unless it's the non-discrimination policy, in which we do require that. But if you answer yes to any of those questions, then you do need to provide us with a copy of the said policy or strategic plan or whatever it is.
Next question is, can you give samples of a good logic model for a whole organization for general operating support? And it's actually in the presentation. We skipped over it when Christina went to the project sample. So you can see it on the website when this presentation is posted. There is a sample for general operating support. Someone's saying hello, that's nice. Some outcomes may be long-term outcomes desired but may not change during the grant period, such as with college graduation rates in the current example. To show impact, an agency would need to have interim outcome measures. Should the outcome measures include both types?
We like to see both types, and you can identify which ones are more longer-term and which ones are short-term. That's fine.
So we're going to go on and then come back to the questions. So we're going to start talking about the applications and how to access them. So as we said at the beginning, all online applications are on the grants page of both the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website and the Valley Community Foundation website. We're going to go to the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website and physically log on to an application. the applications are accessible by clicking on the application link. I'll show you that. And if you've already accessed an application and you've already started it, and we're hoping that the majority of you listening have, once you save it, it then goes into your account. And this is a question I get all the time because people go back to the website and click on the link again. That's only going to bring you to a brand new application. So once you start an account and then once you access an application and save it, you're going to get an automatic email from me that says you've successfully saved your application and here's your account link, and you can access it on your account. So please access it on your account once you save it. So if you have any questions about that, just give me a call, but it's something that a lot of people have trouble with. And then once you log in, you're going to see a screen like this. So we're going to go on to our website and hope we find a screen like that. So, okay. So again, I'm on the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's webpage. I'm on the grants page, and I'm in grants you can apply for. I've scrolled down and I found this category called grants greater than 5,000 responsive grants, and I've opened that up, and I find responsive grants. And you're going to scroll down and you're going to see a few things. You're going to see the deadline date again, reiterated as April 1st. You're going to see some narrative about the process that we've been going over in this webinar, and then you're going to see the categories that Sarah and Jackie talked about. So here's the general operating support category. Here's the link for the application, and here's that link. If you've already started your application, this is the account link. So you can do it from the website or do it from the email you received from me. This is the project support section that we're actually going to go into the application through, and this is the capacity building support section. So there are 3 different applications, and they're all accessed through these sections. I also wanted to point out a few things posted on here. This is our guiding principle that Sarah went over at the beginning of the webinar. So the full 3-page document is here, so we suggest you click into it and download it and read it. Also, there are the attachments that Christina and Sarah went over. So on our website is the logic model, the budget form guide, the GiveGreater profile checklist, and a copy of our anti-discrimination policy. So you're going to need all these things for your application. For project, the budget form guide is only for project support, but you can access them right here, or you can access them on the Valley Community Foundation website grants page, or you can hyperlink right into them through the PowerPoint presentation and or through the application, so I can show you that. And these are for all applicants, but depending on which one you apply for, it's depending on which attachments you're going to need, and you can see that on the attachments page. So we're going to scroll up to project support, and we're going to go into the application. So I simply click on the application, and we're hoping this login screen comes up, and there it is. So I have an account myself, so I'm going to log in to my account. Hopefully this looks familiar. If you don't have an account, you're going to click on this new applicant. Where it says new applicant, you're going to click it on. And it's going to force you or make you start an account. So it's going to ask for your email address. You're going to enter it. It's going to ask you to confirm it. You're going to do that. And it's going to ask you for a password. This is not something you are assigned. This is something you make up. So it asks for at least 5 characters. You want to make something up or use something that you normally use so you can remember it. And once you do that, you're going to create your account. When you do that, you're going to get an automatic email from me that says, this is your password, and remember it, and here's your account link. So I ask you to save it somewhere safe because you're going to need it. You're going to need to know your password, and you're going to need that account link. Okay, so it's going to bring me into this eligibility quiz. So I don't want. Okay. So it's going to ask the eligibility requirements that we went over. Is your organization a tax-exempt organization under 501c3 or any applicable IRS code? Or are you applying through a fiscal sponsor that has a 501c3 or an applicable IRS code? So I'm going to say yes. With this grant, is your organization providing services in any of the 20 towns served by the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven or the Valley Community Foundation? I'm going to pick yes. And if your organization is a previous recipient of a grant through the responsive grants process in the past 3 years, is your reporting up to date? And here's Christina's email in case you have a question about that. For all intents and purposes, I'm going to put yes, or I can put non-applicable because I've never received a responsive grant. But I'm going to put yes, and then I'm going to submit. So here we are in the application. And we're going to go through page by page and focus on some questions, but not all. And as Sarah mentioned before, the general operating support application and the capacity building application, they're very similar. They look the same. They just have some different questions. So although we're just going through projects, it should familiarize you with the other two if you're wanting to apply for project general operating or capacity building. So this first page is organization information. A few things, if you see a red asterisk, that means it's required. You have to fill out that field, which is the majority of the fields, and you can't submit without filling them out. So it's basic information, the organization's name. This is your EIN number. If you see this information square, you can click onto that because it gives you a little bit more information about the field that we're looking for. Date of incorporation, so basic organization information. We ask you about the interest area, so that's the interest area for this particular, for the project support, this is the interest area of your project. So is it health, is it education, is it youth, what is the focus area of your project? And the NTE code, this is a national classification system. This is how you would classify your organization as a whole. So you'll see that there are many, many choices. You just pick the one that's your best guesstimate of who you are and what you do and the classification you fall under. And we're asking you information about your executive director. Who is the contact for this person? We realize some organizations are large and not necessarily is the ED going to be the contact person for the application. And then we ask for your organization's mission and vision. So we ask you to state your mission. If you have a vision, if applicable, we ask you to do that. And we ask you how your organization carries out its mission. So to navigate this application, you can press next to get to the second page, which I'm going to do. Oh boy. Or you can pick the next page up here. So let's see if that's better. Yay. So this page is for the fiscal sponsor. So if you are a 501c3 and you're applying, you can skip over this page because it's not applicable to you. This is only if you're coming under a fiscal sponsor. So if you are, then we ask you basic questions again about the organization and the ED. And then we're asking for request information, a brief description of your request. So for instance, say you're coming in for an after-school program. Your brief description is to support an after-school program for New Haven students in the New Hallville neighborhood. So just brief. We just want you, to describe what you're asking for. The total amount requested. If you are asking for a multi-year grant, you'll see in question 3, we're asking you to split that up. So if you're asking, for instance, in 2013, $30,000, $30,000 in 2014, and $30,000 in 2015, then your total amount requested will be $90. So it's the total you're looking for. If it's a 1-year grant, then you'll see number 3 is not required because you're not asking for multi-year, and it would just be the 1-year request. We're also asking you to identify any timing issues. So we are aware that this process is lengthy. The board's not making their decisions till the end of October. If this timing of our process and our timeline causes an undue hardship, and we've defined that as an exceptional circumstance in which the program or activity to be funded could not or would not be undertaken or would have an undue hardship by an October 2013 funding decision, we're asking you to identify that. That doesn't mean that we would take it early or out of cycle. That just means that it's warranting a conversation if you are encouraged to go to the second phase. Number 5 is asking for more of a detailed description of the project. So this is where you kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what the project is. And number 6 is what community need does your project aim to address, and how will your target population or the community be better off as a result of your project? And Christina's going to talk a little bit about that.
I would just emphasize that this question 6 is really important in terms of thinking about evaluation questions and your overall outcome. Really answering the question, how will your target population and or community will be better off as a result of your project, is answering that. The answer to that question are your outcomes in the logic model, so keep that in mind.
I just wanted to point out too that these boxes expand, so you're not limited to this size. And people often ask me, is there a word limit? And there is not, but we're asking you to be as concise as possible. We're not expecting a page-length answer to any of these questions. You know, our reviewers are reading many of these applications. We don't want them to be reading 20, 25-page applications. You should be able to concisely answer these questions in a clear manner that the reviewer is understanding what you're trying to do. And then the questions go on, how does the project support your mission? If it doesn't, we'd like to know why. Do you have a strategic plan? If yes, how does the project fit into the structure of the plan? Please describe your organization, your board, and your staff. Please describe how your organization and your board and staff provide the necessary leadership. This actually speaks to the guiding principles that Sarah pointed out, and that the documents on our website. I suggest you read that because you can see what our vision is about good leadership in a nonprofit, and may help you craft that answer. We're asking, if this is a pilot project, why are you proposing to do this project at this time? Or if it's an ongoing project, how is the community or target population better off? And we're asking you to provide data for that. Are there any organizations also carrying out this project? Are there partners and collaborations working with you on this project? And here is a section that Christina mentioned when she was going over the logic model. If you feel that the logic model is not expressing what you wanted to express on it, that you need more room, we're giving you the opportunity to expand on it. We're not asking you to reiterate what you've said in the logic model. We're just asking you to expand if you feel like you need to. You'll see that these boxes are not required because you can leave them blank if you feel like the logic model has said it all and you don't need to expand. So that is 14A through 14B. We're asking you to provide a timetable for the project. I had a conversation with a nonprofit this morning who asked, you know, will you fund things that happened in the summer, this summer if we ask through this process? And the answer is no, that we don't fund costs in the rears of this end of October decision. So we're asking you to think about that when you do your timetable, that your timetable should start the beginning of November for this project, end of October.
Right. Grant awards are grant active from the day of the vote of the foundation, although some people are planning that they might start the beginning of 2014, but costs incurred as of November 1st are eligible for the grant.
We're asking you to list the key individuals involved in the project and a brief summary of their qualifications. We're not asking you to copy and paste their resume, just brief summary of their qualifications and their responsibilities in the project. How does your organization involve the people it serves in its planning process? We're interested in that. What is the total cost of the project? And this should mimic that second column on the budget form guide that Sarah pointed out. So these numbers should be the same. Okay. How did you arrive at the total project cost? What other sources of funding will support this project? If you don't receive funding from the Community Foundation or the Valley Community Foundation, what will you do? What is your plan for future support? So that was the request information, and then this page is about evaluation, which Christine is going to go over. The first one is like the other questions for the logic model, more space if you need it, but again, it's not required.
And I don't expect that you'll need more space. But feel free to use it if you have to. I want to say a couple of things about our overall philosophy about evaluation before I talk about these few questions. Evaluation is an important guiding principle for the foundation. We encourage nonprofits to continually improve their services and programs by applying what they learn through self-assessment and the use of evaluation. Evaluation should be integrated into your planning and not something that happens in isolation to satisfy a grant requirement. We are flexible in allowing for different evaluation systems and frameworks depending on your organization's capacity. We really don't care what framework you use. as long as you're using something that's valid and works for you. And first and foremost, evaluation should really be about organizational learning. It should not be seen as something that's punitive. From our perspective, it's okay if you're taking risks and making mistakes as long as you're using evaluation to inform your practice and course corrections. So if you look at the evaluation questions, if you look at question 2, 3, and 4, they really fall under 3 themes: plans and methods, applying what you learn, and sharing what you learn. So you look at question 2, what are your plans for evaluating the effectiveness of your project, and what methods and tools do you plan to use to capture the data to evaluate your project? You should be thinking about specifically what methods you're using to evaluate your program. Are you using results-based accountability? Do you have a third-party evaluator that you're working with that's evaluating your program? How are you collecting data and information? Are you using surveys and questions, or are you using a software program like ETO? For question 3, this is about applying what you learn. Do you have examples about how you have used what you've learned from your evaluations to course correct? If you have examples, you should share them here. Describe what the feedback loop will be. One of the important things in evaluation is that you should be in touch with your constituents and hearing from them and have some sort of feedback loop in place with them. And again, course corrections, and if you have any examples, if this has been an ongoing project, give us some examples of some course corrections maybe you've made or how you've applied what you've learned within the organization or maybe to other programs. Sharing what you learn. We just want to hear about your plans for your evaluation results, whether they're negative or positive, how you plan on sharing them, maybe with your peers through a network, or maybe with the public with some kind of formal report, and of course how you share those results back with us as well. Question 5 is about reporting. If your organization has a current responsive grant that's going to end this year, please describe the progress you've made towards the outcomes in your terms of grant agreement. If you go back to your terms of grant agreement under the conditions section, you'll see maybe 3 or 4 outcomes listed there. And for this question, you need to tell us the progress that you're making towards those outcomes. Your grant report may not be due until October, but that's when our board is looking at these grant applications, so we want to have an update on the status of your grant before then. If it's a 1-year grant that's ending in 2013, then you'll go back and look at your logic model and look at the outcome column and report back to us on the status or progress you're making towards those outcomes.
Just wanted to point out here at the bottom the Save and Finish Later button. It's really important to click this while you're working on the application. Every time you save it, you'll get an automatic email from me that says you saved it successfully with the reiteration of your account link so you can get back into it. Also, there is a timeout feature on this online application. So if you're working on the online application and you leave it open and you haven't saved it and you go out to lunch, for example, for about an hour, there's a possibility you could be timed out and lose all your data. So I can't stress enough to please save and finish later periodically as you go, because we don't want you to do all this work and then lose it. And you can call me at the house. I can give you some mistakes. So. And the next page is the organizational details. Basically, our board has an interest in knowing the demographics of organizations and who they serve, so this page has a lot of information being asked for that. Information on race and ethnicity of the population served, staff, and board. So as you go down, you'll see that they're all required, and we do realize that some organizations do not collect this data, and that's okay. You still have to fill in these boxes, and what we recommend is that you just fill them in with the number 0. If you don't collect this data, you can see as you go on, there's quite a bit of information that we ask about who you serve in terms of region, towns, neighborhoods, low income, income in general, and again, race and ethnicity. If you do not collect this data, we want you to talk about that in this box. So we're asking for your project's target population. We need you to answer that question. And we need you to be specific. So you need to tell us the size of your target population, for instance, how many people you serve annually, your geographic reach, any distinct characteristics, the ages, where they're from, any other things that you can think of. And then if you do not collect specific data, we need you to talk about that and say we don't collect this data, but for instance, we are open to 5 towns in the Valley and we know that their race and ethnicity in the Valley is X, Y, and Z. So you can put some of that data in, but we do need you to address it because this is a paper read, and when our reviewers are going through your application and they see all zeros, we want them to know why it's all zeros. And if you have any questions about that, you can call Sarah or myself. Christina?
And I would just clarify, we don't want to just know that, no, you don't collect the data. We really do want to know what the reason is. Is it a staff capacity reason, or it's that you don't think it's important or relevant to your program? Having the reason will be helpful.
And then after the demographic, we ask you for financial information, so your annual operating budget, your fiscal year end, and we ask you for some information on your 990, so your total revenue, expenses, liabilities, and assets. And if your current year revenue expenses exceeds or are less than 15% of your most recent completed year, please explain why. You could have gotten a $100,000 grant last year that you've spent, and you're not going to have that in your budget, so there's going to be a discrepancy. We'd like to know that. And the last question is, please describe your organization's demonstration of sound management in terms of the role of board and staff in resource development and financial oversight, including your audit review and financial reporting. So the last page is the attachments page. So we're asking for this list of attachments. For those of you that have filled out the full application review in the past, this will look familiar. But the key, there's a few things I just wanted to point out. I won't go through each one. But as you can see, there's some hyperlinks so you can get to the documents through here that we pointed out on the website, the budget form guide, the logic model, the anti-discrimination policy. Also, when you're uploading the attachments, I just wanted to go over this because it is a question a lot of people ask me. So in this upload, in this title box, we have some required and not required documents. So when you are uploading a document, you need to go into this box and pick the one you're uploading and click it on. And then you're going to click Browse and find it in your network or your hard drive, wherever you're saving things, and click it. So you'll see it in this box in the file name, and then you're going to upload. What's going to happen when you start uploading documents is above this attachment, you're going to see a list form of all your attachments. The key is really clicking on this drop-down menu and going through it one by one, because a lot of people just keep this one on, the 501c3, and they upload all their documents, and the software is not smart enough to read what you're naming your document. The only way they're connecting the fact that you've uploaded your logic model is the fact that you've picked logic model. Okay, so really make sure that you do that. If you're not attaching everything that's required, it's not going to let you submit it. And a lot of people call me and say, but I've attached everything. Yeah, but the software is just not smart enough to realize that because you named it logic model, it's not connecting it to logic model. So if you have any problems with the attachments, please call me. I'd be happy to walk you through it. We don't want anyone suffering out there in terms of the technology, and we can just go through it together.
Denise, for operating support and capacity building, the attachments go in the GiveGreater profile, correct?
Correct. So if you go into general operating support or capacity building, what you'll see on this attachments page is the GiveGreater profile checklist that Christina went over. So you can hyperlink into that. It's basically your instruction guide, and it's going to tell you that you're going to attach everything to the GiveGreater profile. You're not even going to see an upload section. Okay, so nothing's uploaded to this particular application for general operating support and capacity building.
So what is the application review process? People are interested that it doesn't go into a black hole somewhere, that there is a process by which we review all these wonderful applications that we get, and we're very excited about that. We use a community review process for the first stage of this application process. I am recruiting currently about 55 individuals who are going to review all the applications that we get. And it's a read-only process. Since these are fuller applications, invariably an individual reviewer will read between 7 and 10 of these applications, and we have each application read by 3 different people. The community reviewers represent the region. We have people from the valley, we have people from the shoreline, we have people around the inner city, and across gender, age, ethnicity, background. We've included volunteers from the Community Foundation leadership activities. From the Women and Girls Fund, from the Progressive Latino Fund, past grantees, individuals who are not running not-for-profits. If you're not applying currently, you can ask to be a reviewer. We like to recruit not-for-profits in the process as long as they're not currently applying. That's the rule. And many times you get a different perspective from reviewing other people's applications, that you can apply that learning to your own development of applications for here or otherwise. We've heard that reflection. And current donors. We have a lot of, we usually have a good percentage of our reviewers who are donors through the Community Foundation, or donors to organizations in our community. And again, they're very interested to see what our process is. It's a rather rigorous process, and they learn something from it. They also learn about new possible organizations that they could be interested in. And then we have representatives from other area funders, subject matter experts, and community representatives at large. We ask all reviewers to disclose any affiliations with not-for-profits to avoid conflicts that would impact their objectivity. And we try to use the information about those subject areas that they're most competent in and proficient in, and have knowledge around to match them up with applications that we feel could take advantage of that knowledge. As I said, each application is read by 3 reviewers and scored using the application merit score sheet, which will be up on the website soon. And all these scores are shared with our board of directors, both the Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, to help them decide which applications are encouraged or discouraged. Now, the scoring allows us to have a starting place to have a conversation with our boards. The reviewers understand that they're not the final decision makers about who goes forward with full applications. That is our board. And our board takes other things into consideration in addition to how meritorious the proposal is in terms of our reach in the region. So many times there may be an application that might be below the kind of demarcation of those that are scoring higher. But because they reach into a certain region that they want to make sure that they have a sampling of, they may reach below the line to encourage that, or with a particular population, or they want to take a risk with somebody who may not have scored well, but they feel that there's a gem of an idea in that. And so we also ask our reviewers to help lift those possibilities up too. I want to encourage you to know that this is just a read-only process. There will not be any conversations with organizations by the reviewers. So we encourage you to read your proposal over carefully, and have somebody who might be one-off from your organization who could view it objectively and maybe help you see to the degree to which you've been able to answer the questions and provide enough information for them to be scored. Kind of a little scratchy, oh, excuse me. Because many times just the very basic information we find is missing from these applications in terms of who, what, when, where. And so we really want to make sure that you've done the best job. And I know from writing proposals myself, or writing anything, that sometimes I kind of read in between the lines. I think I put it in there. It's in my head, but it just never got on paper. This is your opportunity to use somebody, like they have those lifelines in these programs. This is your helpline, your lifeline, somebody who is a good doobie who will be willing to read your application and give you really good feedback as to whether you hit the mark. I want to reiterate that this is the first stage. There is a second stage. This first stage is only a read-only. The second stage does allow for a lot of conversations. In the same way that we have community reviewers, we have a cadre of individuals who review the application again in the second stage and schedule these site visits. And those individuals are writers in many ways. People who we've had and who are very skilled analytically and have good thinking and analysis background. And so they are the ones who will be assigned, and they usually have a portfolio of grants that they are reviewing for us, and Denise and I coach them. So Denise and I divide up those writers between us, and we're coaching them along the way and nudging them about the questions that they should be asking you and reviewing on as an item. Jackie can vouch for us that we sometimes it's annoying because we are never by the time you get to the third or fourth draft of these things, we know them almost as intimately as those people who are working closely with you. So we just want to make sure that you understand that it's a different set of individuals who are doing the second stage of the review, people who are very gifted in their ability to share through an analysis to our board what are the salient points in your program, what are the pros and cons of supporting this, and give the board a context in which to understand your application, which is a sizable challenge as we go through that. Any questions? Do
you want to stop for questions or do it at the end?
We can do it at the end.
Okay.
Is there anything else around the evaluation, Christina, that you want to share? Because we did it in the moment, but I just want to make sure
that we covered the slides in the when we talked about the evaluation questions. I would just emphasize that you should look at our guiding principles. We're looking for organizations that are fostering a results-based culture, have realistic goals in line with their mission, have assumptions that support the goals and the needs in the community, and knowledge of the constituency and their needs, and clearly articulated outcomes and measures.
I want to go to the grant recipient.
If you become a grant recipient, then we'll ask you to update us on your progress each year if you're a multi-year grant, and how you're making progress towards your outcomes through required reporting. And that reporting will include having a GiveGreater.org profile updated and answering questions about your outcomes and any challenges or successes with your program. When you receive a multi-year grant, the subsequent year's funding is conditional based on our review of your performance on the progress you're making. So keep that in mind and submit your reports on time. If you receive a one-year grant, we also need you to submit your reports on time because it's very important to us to report back to our board on the impact that our grants are having, that our funding is having, and that your grants are actually having, your organizations are having. So I'd ask you to just keep that in mind.
Are there some questions that we could answer at this point?
Sure.
So when are funds actually distributed if a grant is approved for project support in late October?
You get a terms of grant. That's first you get an announcement after the board meeting within that week as to whether you got a grant or not. And that's followed up with a terms of grant that's emailed to you. On signing that terms of grant and getting it back to us, that triggers your first payment. If it's a small grant, you usually get the full amount right away. If it's a larger grant, you get it usually in 2 payments. And that's outlined in the terms of grant is how that's going to be paid.
Can the funds approved on October 2013 be allocated for a project to take place in July and August 2014?
Yes. That's easy.
What is the average size of a general operating support grant?
It's about the same as the $20,000, $30,000 number is about the same in terms of our annual grant.
What funding is available for agencies that have not been in existence for over 5 years?
Fill out a project program application, as well as I outlined at the beginning of this webinar the other grant-making opportunities that exist at both of the foundations, and so you may want to look at one of those other if you're doing gender-specific work for women and girls, you may want to think about applying to the Women and Girls Fund. Those applications usually become available at the end of November, beginning of December of every year, and are due in January. If you're doing river work, again, that application is available at the same time with a deadline in January. And then we have those revolving processes, both for the Valley Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, which is $5,000 and under type of grant. And that you can apply for any time of the year, whenever the need arises.
Another question, can more than one grant, like capacity building and project support, be applied for during the same year?
I encourage you to make a choice. What is the highest priority? Given that we have limited dollars, you're competing against yourself, and so we really want you to be very planful and think about what kind of investment could the foundation make in your organization that would make a difference, and make a choice.
I think it's important to clarify, too, that this is one pot of money, so there is no set aside a certain amount for project, general operating support, or capacity building. So they all come out of the same pot. So when Sarah says you're competing against yourself, it means you're competing against the money in that one pot. And the next question is, if you have a fiscal sponsor, do you want their financial information?
Yes.
Oh, seems like that's it. Is anyone in the room have any questions? Or yes, Jean.
That I wrote down.
Okay.
So how many grants can we apply for per year? Also, how many sponsorships?
In terms of, this is only once a year process for this responsive grant making process. So, this is your chance to get your application into this process. It does not eliminate the possibility of you going for an under $5,000 grant. You can apply for that at any time during the year for a particular need. This foundation, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, does have a limitation on that you can only come every other year for that. The Valley Community Foundation does not have that kind of stipulation. You can come on an annual basis if you so choose. Sponsorships, we will only give you up to $2,500 in any one year. So you could come potentially for a sponsorship for $500 and come back as long as you don't exceed that total of $2,500. And again, there's a limited pool, so you need to think about that. There is an interest to kind of spread the wealth and think about how many organizations we could touch with the sponsorships. But again, ask for what you need up to that limit.
Can more than one organization member be on the grant application at the same time?
Say that again.
Can more than one organization member be on the grant application at the same time? In the application?
Online. Oh, yes.
I don't know.
How about that?
We can try it.
We usually encourage people to pass it on.
Right, and actually, Jane, you bring up something I did miss when I was on the application. There is an opportunity to email the applications as you're working on them to other people in your organization. So, for instance, say you don't do the financial part, and you want to email that to a colleague, and they fill in the financial part and email it back to you. But I'm not sure, and why don't you and Linda try it, because then, and let me know.
Okay, so would we use the same password?
You would have to use the same password, because it's the only way you can access your account. So I would worry about that. Yeah, I would.
We've never tried it.
Never tried it. I would try to avoid it, because if she's making changes and you're on there, and I would do the emailing back and forth of the drafts. I really would.
And then what if we received a grant over 3 years ago? Then you would still be eligible to apply.
Because it said within the past 3 years. So
that's for reporting. So if you've received a grant within the past 3 years, we need to make sure you're up to date with your reporting requirements. So we have another question from the webinar. Can nonprofits that serve both the Greater New Haven area and the rest of the nation apply for capacity?
As long as you're serving our population in our town.
And as long as the capacity building results will result in a greater impact on this community.
Connected, thank you. Okay.
And I wanted to say one thing that we didn't mention, and I think it's something anybody who's applying for general operating support needs to know that we ask those who get general operating support to also participate in the CCAT. And I just, Jackie, just share that a little bit.
Okay, general operating support grantees are required to participate in something called CCAT, the Core Capacity Assessment Tool. It's an online assessment survey that's taken by board members, senior staff, and key volunteers that really help you understand where your organization stands as an organization in its in leadership, management, adaptive, and technical capacities. It's a very useful tool. It will then give you a checklist of things that are priorities for your organization to grow the strength of your organization. And it gives you some concrete steps you can take without resources to implement right away to make changes within your infrastructure, and also gives you those things that you can do with additional resources that will help your organization. We do not see the individual scores from those reports, but we do get an aggregate report, so we see what's happening across the sector, and that's what we use to help inform the capacity building programs that we present. We then ask within 2 years after you've completed the CCAT for the first time that you retake the tool so that you'll be able to see organizationally how you have grown, and we can see across the sector how the organizations have been impacted by both the general operating support and the use of CCAT.
So we are your lifeline to this process, and we've listed ourselves in this webinar about how you can reach us, both email and through the phone. Denise and I serve as kind of the primary contact, but Jackie is a wonderful resource, particularly anybody who's applying for capacity building. That is an area that falls under her responsibility and management. And as Christina said, anybody who has evaluation questions or particularly wants her to review your logic model, she's available to you. We're again surprised that people don't take more advantage of her, but she does. So she did. Did they? Oh, good. But she's a very quick read. She zips through those very easily, and she's a really wonderful resource for that. And then for anybody who wants to make sure that you have a GiveGreater profile and want some help with that, make sure that you're updating and you're meeting the basic requirements for it to be considered as part of the full application. Stephanie Chung is available to you. I encourage you that even if you don't need to do one for this process, that you may want to think about that. It's a wonderful opportunity. I think if you heard the statistics that Christina said at the beginning of this webinar in terms of the kind of outcomes that organizations have had as a result of being on the GiveGreater database in terms of getting new donors to their community, or understanding how they are impacting the issues. If you go to the GiveGreater profile, you'll see that they're pretty comprehensive. It is, our board uses it a lot, as board members, and so it is a way of having exposure perhaps that you might not otherwise have. So you don't have to wait for us to require it as part of receiving grant here. I would encourage you to think about getting one up.
This is the end of the webinar. Thank you for participating. As a reminder, the webinar will be posted on our website along with the questions and answers. If you have any questions about today's webinar, or you would like guidance on which application to complete, please call Sarah or Denise.
Wait, hold on 1 minute. We just forgot. Jackie has an announcement.
We do have 2 sessions planned tomorrow called Nuts and Bolts of the Application. We're doing the first one at the Derby Public Library. There's unlimited space at the Derby Public Library. It's 9:30 to 11 o'clock. Valerie Knight-DeGangi and I will go question by question through, at that session, first the Valley Revolving Response application, then the project support application, the general operating support, and capacity building support applications for the main responsive process. We'll go question by question through those and really give you the hidden meaning behind the questions and give you some pointers. We'll also go through the logic model, and we will actually review the score sheets so you know what our reviewers are going to be looking at in those process. We'll do that at the Derby Public Library 9:30 to 11, and then repeat that here at the Community Foundation at 1 o'clock At the 1 o'clock session, we will not be going over the the resolving response application, just the 3 main applications for our responsive process. And that's 1 o'clock here. If you would like to attend the Derby session in the morning, please just come to the Derby Public Library at 9:30. If you would like to come to the New Haven session, please email me. My email is on this last slide. Please email me so I can get a count of who's going to have to fit into the room. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Goodbye.